Welcome, restless souls, to Carman's Crypt. I'm Carman Carrion, keeper of forgotten tales and curator of nightmares. You've wandered into my domain, where each week I unearth a fresh horror from the depths of human imagination. In these darkened halls, stories wait like hungry shadows. Each tale we've collected whispers of terrors both ancient and new. From crumbling mansions where something skitters behind the walls, to that strange text message you received at 3 a.m. from a number that shouldn't exist. So gather close, the candles are lit, the shadows grow long, and the witching hour is upon us. Are you prepared to face what lurks in the darkest recesses of Carman's Crypt? Lock your doors, still your nerves, and remember, here, every fear comes to life. This is Carman's Crypt. Your sanctuary of scares awaits. Natalie Hendricks was loading groceries into her trunk when she first felt it. A pressure, like the air before a thunderstorm, thick and electric, making the hair on her arms stand on end. She paused, a bag of apples halfway to the trunk, and looked up at the October sky. Clear, cloudless. The sun hung low on the horizon, painting Millbrook's Main Street in shades of amber and rust. "You okay, Natalie?" She turned. Johnny Chambers from the hardware store stood by his pickup, keys in hand, watching her with mild concern. "Yeah, She shook her head. "Thought I felt something. Like a storm coming." Johnny glanced at the sky and shrugged. "Forecast is clear all week. You coming to the town meeting tonight?" Natalie had forgotten about the meeting. The whole town would be there to vote on whether to sell the old Pritchard property to some development company out of Chicago. "Probably. Jeff wants to go." "See you there then." Johnny climbed into his truck, and Natalie finished loading her groceries. But the feeling didn't leave. If anything, it got worse. By the time she pulled into her driveway on Maple Street, her hands were trembling on the steering wheel. She sat there for a moment, staring at her house, a modest 2-story colonial with blue shutters, and a tire swing in the front yard. Her daughter Emma's bike lay on its side in the grass. Through the living room window, she could see Jeff on the couch, probably watching football. Normal. Everything was normal. So why did she feel like screaming? Natalie grabbed the groceries and headed inside, where Emma was doing homework at the kitchen table and Jeff barely looked up from the game. She put away the milk and eggs, started dinner, helped Emma with long division. Normal, routine, safe. But the pressure kept building. At 6:47 p.m., the streetlights came on. Natalie was stirring pasta sauce when every single one of them exploded. The sound was like gunfire, racing down the street. Through the kitchen window, she watched the bulbs burst one after another in a cascade of sparks and shattered glass. "What the hell?" Jeff appeared beside her, staring out at the darkening street. The sun had set. Without the streetlights, Millbrook was suddenly profoundly dark. Emma came running into the kitchen. "Mom, what was that?" "I don't know, baby. It's okay. Probably just a power surge or something." But Natalie knew it wasn't. That pressure in the air had become a weight, pressing down on her chest until she could barely breathe. Her phone buzzed. A text from Karen Whitmore, her neighbor 3 houses down. "Did you see that? All the lights on the whole street just exploded." Then another text from Johnny Chambers. "This is happening all over town. Every streetlight. Town meeting is still on. We need to figure this out." Jeff was already putting on his jacket. "I'm heading to the town hall. You and Emma stay here. Lock the doors." "Jeff." "Natalie. It's probably just a transformer issue. I'll be back in an hour." He kissed her forehead and was gone before she could protest. Natalie locked the door behind him, then went through the house checking all the other locks, windows, back door, garage. When she returned to the living room, Emma was curled up on the couch, eyes wide. "Mom, What's happening? Nothing, sweetheart. Just a power problem. Everything's fine. But Emma pointed at the window. Then why are the animals leaving? Natalie looked. In the dim light from the living room, she could see them. Squirrels running down the street, a raccoon lumbering past at full speed, a cat yowling as it sprinted across lawns, and birds, dozens of them, taking flight from trees and rooftops, their shadows crossing the moon like ashes rising from a fire. The animals knew. Whatever was coming, they knew to run. Natalie's phone rang, making her jump. It was Jeff.
Natalie, you need to get down to the town hall now. Bring Emma.
What? Jeff, you said...
Just come. Everyone's here. There's something.
His voice dropped to a whisper.
Natalie, there's something in the town square.
The town hall parking lot was packed. Every resident of Millbrook who could walk had apparently shown up. Natalie gripped Emma's hand as they pushed through the crowd gathered on the front steps. Inside, the main hall was chaos. People shouting, some crying, a few praying in the corner. Natalie found Jeff near the front, standing with Johnny Chambers and Mayor Patricia Reeves. What's going on? Natalie demanded. Mayor Reeves, a stern woman in her 60s who'd run Millbrook for the last 15 years, raised her hands for quiet. The crowd slowly settled into uneasy silence. All right, listen up, the mayor said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. At approximately 7:15, something appeared in the town square. Del Morrison saw it first when he was closing up the diner. Del, a heavy-set man with flowers still on his apron, nodded miserably from the crowd. I thought it was a deer at first, but when I looked closer... His voice cracked. It wasn't a deer. What was it? Someone called out. Mayor Reeves exchanged a look with Police Chief Larson, who stood with his hands resting on his holstered gun. We don't know, Del. Why don't you tell me what you saw? Del wiped his face with his apron. It was big, maybe 10 feet tall, standing on 4 legs like an insect, but wrong, all sharp angles and joint. And the shell? Jesus, the shell was almost translucent, like you could see things moving inside it. Oil slick colors shifting around. Did it do anything? Johnny asked. It just stood there in the middle of the square right by the fountain. Then, Del swallowed hard. Then it opened what I guess was its mouth, and it made this sound. Not loud, but you could feel it in your bones. And then it said something. Said what? Jeff pressed. Del looked like he might be sick. It said, 24 hours. Those who are judged wanting will be found. Those who are found will answer. Then it just stayed there. Hasn't moved since. Panic erupted in the hall, people shouting over each other, demanding answers, plans, escape routes. Quiet! Chief Larson fired his gun into the ceiling, and the crowd fell silent. We need to stay calm. I've called state police, the FBI, anyone who'll listen. Help is coming. Until then, we need to figure out what this thing wants. It wants us to confess. The voice came from the back hall. Natalie turned to see Mike Winger, the town's oldest resident at 93, being wheeled forward by his grandson. Mike's eyes were rheumy but sharp, and when he spoke, everyone listened. Mike, do you know what this is? Mayor Reeves asked. My grandfather told me a story, Mike said. His voice thin but steady. Said his grandfather told him, passed down from the old country. Every few generations the arbiter comes, a creature older than man, older than towns and laws and courts. It comes to places where the scales have tipped too far, where too many guilty walk free, and their sins have poisoned the ground beneath them. That's insane, someone muttered. Mike smiled grimly. Is it? This creature. It don't care about your laws. Don't matter if you were never caught, never charged, never punished. It can smell what you've done. Smell it like smoke.
And if it judges you guilty, truly guilty, in your heart and soul, it will hunt you. You got 24 hours to confess, to make it right if you can. Those who don't."
He shook his head.
"My grandfather said the creature takes them, and what it does to them is worse than any death."
"That's ridiculous," Mayor Reeves said, but her voice wavered. "We're not living in some fairy tale. This is probably some kind of biological weapon, or—"
"Then explain the smell,"
Mike said quietly. Natalie realized she'd been noticing it for the last few minutes, a scent creeping through the town hall. Faint but growing stronger, like burned metal and rotting fruit. Something that made her stomach turn.
"It's hunting,"
Mike said.
"It's already started. Anyone in this room carrying heavy guilt, and I mean the kind of guilt that sits in your chest like a stone. That creature knows it's got your scent now, and by this time tomorrow, if you haven't confessed, it'll come for you."
The crowd exploded into chaos again, people rushing for the doors, others collapsing into sobs. Natalie pulled Emma close, her mind racing. She thought about the Mercy killing 5 years ago, her mother dying of cancer, in so much pain the morphine barely touched it, begging Natalie to help her. And Natalie had. She had increased the dose, held her mother's hand as she slipped away. Murder legally, mercy in her heart, but still, guilt, still a secret she'd never told anyone. Not Jeff, not the doctors, nobody. Would the creature smell that on her? "We need to leave," Jeff was saying, pulling at her arm. "Get out of town before—"
"It won't matter,"
Marcus called out.
"You can't outrun it. Once it's got your scent, it'll follow you anywhere. Only way to survive is to confess. Tell the truth. Make amends if you can."
Natalie looked around the hall, at the mayor whose face had gone pale, at Chief Larson whose hand trembled on his gun, at Johnny Chambers, at Karen Whitmore, at Dale Morrison. How many of them were carrying secrets? How many had done things they thought they'd buried forever? How many would be dead by morning? By midnight, the exodus had begun. Despite Marcus's warning, nearly half the town tried to run. Cars streamed out of Millbrook in a panicked convoy, headlights cutting through the darkness. Natalie watched from her living room window as the taillights disappeared into the night. Jeff wanted to go with them, but Natalie couldn't shake what Marcus had said. You can't outrun it. So they stayed, locked in their house with Emma sleeping fitfully upstairs, and Jeff pacing the living room like a caged animal. "Tell me again why we're not leaving," Jeff said for the 10th time. Because Marcus was right. This thing, whatever it is, it's not going to let us run. You don't know that. Natalie looked at her husband. Jeff was a good man, a good father, but she could see something in his eyes now. Fear, yes, but also guilt. What was he hiding? "Jeff," she said carefully, "is there something you need to tell me?" His face shuddered. "What? No. Why would you?" "Because that thing in the square can apparently smell guilt. And you look terrified." "Natalie, there's a 10-foot monster insect in our town. Everyone's terrified." She waited. Jeff ran his hands through his hair. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. "The accident last year, with Jeremy Fletcher." Natalie's blood ran cold. Jeremy Fletcher, the teenager who'd been hit by a car on Route 7, left for dead in a ditch? He had survived, but barely. The driver had never been found. "Jeff, tell me you didn't." "I didn't mean to." "He came out of nowhere, riding his bike without lights. I swerved, but I clipped him. I stopped, Natalie. I got out, but he was unconscious and bleeding, and I panicked. I thought if I called 911, they'd know it was me and I'd lose my license, maybe go to jail, and we'd lose everything. So I left. I called it in anonymously from a payphone 10 miles away, but I left him there." Natalie felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. "Jeff, oh my God! Jeremy Fletcher has brain damage. He can't walk right anymore." I know, okay? I've lived with it every day. I've donated to his medical fund anonymously. I volunteer at the hospital where he does physical therapy. I've tried to make up for it, but..." His voice broke. "But I can't take it back. And now that thing is going to kill me for it." They stood in silence. Natalie wanted to rage at him, to scream and throw things and demand to know how he could keep this a secret. But she was carrying her own secret, wasn't she? Her own sin. "I killed my mother," she said quietly. Jeff stared at her. "She begged me to. The cancer was eating her alive, and she was in so much pain. So I gave her extra morphine. Enough to let her sleep. Forever." Tears burned her eyes. "I murdered her, Jeff. And I'd do it again, because I couldn't watch her suffer. But it's still murder." They looked at each other across the living room. Two people who'd shared a bed for 12 years, who'd raised a daughter together, who'd built a life, and neither of them had known the truth about the other. "What do we do?" Jeff whispered. Before Natalie could answer, the screaming started. It came from somewhere east, toward the old industrial district, a sound of pure terror, rising and falling, then cutting off abruptly. Then another scream, this one closer, north, maybe 3 streets over. Then another. The arbiter had begun its hunt. In the darkness, she could see lights coming on in houses up and down the street, people waking to the screams. And then she saw movement. The creature was beautiful in a horrible way. It moved like oil on water, all flowing grace despite its massive size. The translucent shell that covered its body reflected the moonlight in patterns of blue, green, purple, and gold. 4 legs, each ending in points sharp enough to puncture asphalt. And the head, if you could call it that, was a smooth, eyeless surface with a vertical slit that opened to reveal rows and rows of sharp teeth. It was heading down Maple Street. "Get Emma!" Natalie hissed. "Now! Back door, we run!" But even as they bolted for the stairs, Natalie knew it was useless. The creature paused outside the Cooper house 4 doors down. It stood there perfectly still for 10 seconds. Then it drove one of its 4 legs through the front door. The screaming that followed made Natalie's stomach heave. Jeff grabbed Emma from her bed and they ran downstairs, Natalie right behind them. They were at the back door when the smell hit them. Burned metal, rotting fruit, and underneath it something worse. The smell of their guilt made manifest. The creature knew they were here. "Confess!" Jeff shouted suddenly. "That's what Marcus said. We have to confess." "To who?" Natalie clutched Emma tighter as the sound of splintering wood came from the front of the house. "To everyone! To the town!" Jeff fumbled for his phone, his hand shaking so badly he almost dropped it. He opened Facebook, started a live video. "My name is Jeff Hendricks," he said, his voice cracking. "Last year I hit Jeremy Fletcher with my car and left him for dead. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I'll turn myself in. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. But please, God, I'm sorry." The front door exploded inward. The arbiter filled the hallway, its crystalline teeth gleaming in the dim light. But it paused. That eyeless head turned toward Jeff, seeming to consider. "I killed my mother," Natalie blurted out. "Mary Jameson, 5 years ago. I gave her an overdose of morphine to end her suffering. I murdered her. It wasn't legal, it wasn't right, and I've carried it ever since. I'm sorry. I'm confessing. Please. My daughter is innocent, please." Emma was sobbing in her arms. The creature moved closer, and Natalie could see now what Dale had meant about things moving inside the shell. Shadows, maybe, or something worse. The vertical slit of its mouth opened. That bone-deep vibration filled the air. And then it spoke, not with words, but with a feeling that resonated in Natalie's chest. Remorse, truth, balance. The creature turned and flowed back out through the shattered doorway. Natalie collapsed to her knees, clutching Emma. Through the broken door, she could see the arbiter moving to the next house, to the next person carrying unconfessed guilt. The night wasn't over, not by a long shot. By dawn, Millbrook had been transformed. Of the 1,200 residents who'd stayed in town, 93 were dead. Their bodies, or what remained of them, were found in their homes, their cars, the places they'd tried to hide. The creature had been thorough, but the 247 who'd confessed publicly, truthfully, holding nothing back, had been spared. Natalie and Jeff sat on their front porch as the sun rose, watching police and ambulances move through the devastated town. Emma was asleep upstairs, exhausted. Jeff's confession had gone viral overnight. The police were already asking when he had turned himself in. Natalie's admission had triggered an investigation into her mother's death. Their lives were over, in a way, but they were alive. Mayor Patricia Reeves was dead. They had found her in her office at Town Hall, torn apart. Chief Larson had survived. He had confessed to planting evidence in a drug case 10 years ago. Dale Morrison was dead, and nobody knew what sin he'd been hiding. Johnny Chambers had survived after confessing to an affair he'd had with an employee. Karen Whitmore had confessed to embezzling from the PTA and lived. Some sins were heavier than others, Natalie realized. The creature didn't judge based on law or custom. It judged based on truth and remorse. If you carried real guilt, if you knew in your heart what you'd done was wrong, it found you. And if you couldn't confess, couldn't face the truth of yourself. The creature had still been in the town square when Natalie had looked an hour ago, standing by the fountain like a monument, waiting, maybe, to make sure the scales were truly balanced. "Do you think it's gone?" Jeff asked quietly. Natalie shook her head. "I think it's making sure we don't forget, that we don't bury our sins again." "Will you ever forgive me? For Jeremy?" Natalie thought about it. "I don't know, but I understand why you ran. I understand carrying a secret so heavy you think it might crush you. I understand guilt." They sat in silence as the sun climbed higher. The arbiter remained in the square, an iridescent reminder that some judgments didn't come from courts or laws, or even God. Some judgments came from older places, from the deep spaces between right and wrong, from the weight of what we carry in our own hearts. And sometimes, those judgments came with teeth. And so, dear listeners, we emerge from another dark corner of Carman's Crypt. But remember, the horrors you've heard tonight are merely echoes of the terrors that await in the shadows of your mind. If you enjoyed your stay in the crypt, why not invite a friend to join us next week? After all, fear is best when shared. Leave a review if you dare, or share your own tales of terror on my social media, or on my website, carman-carrion.com. Who knows? Your nightmares might just become my next story. Until next time, keep checking under your bed. And remember, in Carman's Crypt, every fear comes to life, and no one is truly safe. Sweet dreams, if you can still sleep at all.